Hello and welcome to Common Ground Helps. My name is Reggie Harrison and we are here today to tell you about the things that Common Ground does. So Common Ground is an organization in Oakland County that helps people, and that's what most people know, is that they help. But today we are going to go in and explore the many things that Common Ground does for the community. So we have Tony Rothschild, the CEO, and we have Kay White, a board member and longtime volunteer, and we have Mary Fairman, who is also a longtime volunteer at the Sanctuary. So these are our guests today, and we are going to cover some very interesting things about Common Ground and what they do for many, many people in our community. So Tony, let's start with you. Tell us about Common Ground. How long have you been with them?
Well, I've been there, this is my 22nd year of leadership with Common Ground.
Okay.
And agency started, incorporated in 1971, so this is our 42nd year.
Wow.
Our mission is helping people move from crisis to hope, and we've stuck with that mission for the whole time. And it got started in the community by realizing there was a program in downtown Detroit called Open City.
Okay.
That helped kids in the city, and there were people in Oakland County that realized that youth needed support here. So it started with a youth focus, and there was a suicide at one of the Bloomfield high schools, and it was actually students and faculty and some other community volunteers from Birmingham Bloomfield that got the organization started in 1971.
Okay, so it started grassroots, and then it started to build into a nonprofit, right? They got their nonprofit status.
Right, we're nonprofit. They incorporated in 1971.
Wow.
And here we are today in 2012.
So it started as one place, one building?
One building.
And what do you have now?
Had a well, one building with no staff, was all volunteers.
Okay.
And we've grown into 7 different facilities in 2 different counties and over 200 staff.
Wow. How many volunteers?
That's a good question. It changes from time to time. We have probably over 80 to 100 volunteers in the organization.
Because we know that all nonprofit organizations are stronger when they have volunteers to help with their success. So let's go to Kay for this one, because Kay
I'm nodding for that, yes.
Kay, you're on the board of directors,
Yes,
right?
I am.
And you also, how long have you been with Common Ground?
Well, I've been answering the phones for 28 years. And so every Monday morning, I'm in there answering phones, and I love my work on the board. The board is very interesting and very involved, very visionary, but the part of me that really keeps me coming back all the time is the crisis line, because anyone can call the crisis line, and anyone does call the crisis line, and it's the door. It's the door that's never closed to anybody. So if you start at the crisis line, you can get a whole variety of services. You have somebody who will listen to you, who cares about what you're going through, who tries to work with you to, first of all, clarify what you're doing, and secondly, to help you figure out what you need to get to the place that you'd like to end up at. It's a very self-determining model. You know, it's one where somebody isn't telling someone what to do. They're being listened to with dignity and respect, and coming to a conclusion that hopefully will be a better place. They've been moving from their crisis to a situation that's full of hope.
And is it all volunteers on the crisis
No,
line?
it's a combination of staff and volunteers. As Tony mentioned at one time, it was all volunteers. But as we've grown, and since we're 24 hours every day of the year, we've needed staff. Staff have helped us keep current, help us make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do. And yet I think the idea of the heart that volunteers bring and the love of what they're doing is also found in the staff, and everybody is pretty much on the same page for what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it.
So there's a synergy between
Oh
the
yes,
staff and the
yes,
volunteers.
that's a great word for it.
So everyone goes through training before
Yes,
they...
there's 70 hours worth of training, and then there's further training when they get to answer the phones.
Okay.
I find the training helps me in regular life just as well as on the phones, because it really teaches you how to listen and how to engage with somebody. And in these days of a lot of stresses, a lot of times when you need someone to help and to listen, that's what Common Ground does. We're there.
Wow, wonderful. So as a board member, you are helping to plan some of the things that the organization does, but as a volunteer, you are feeding your heart, as you say.
It's a nice balance for me.
That's great.
Yeah.
So speaking of volunteers, we have Mary, who, how long have you been volunteering at the sanctuary?
13 and a half years.
So the sanctuary, so we can now talk about the sanctuary. The sanctuary is a building in Royal Oak that is a runaway and homeless youth facility for 2 weeks? How long do they
It's
say?
a 3-week program.
It's a 3-week program.
Besides runaways and homeless youth, it's a facility that's there to help kids in crisis who are having a hard time coping with whatever their issues are at the time. A lot of times it's family, sometimes it's school. The children don't have to be homeless or runaways. We take children with family approval only. When they come into the program, they're usually scared. They're usually stressed. What am I going to be doing this whole time? And we have a very set schedule every day that we follow. And a lot of what we teach them are coping skills to deal with whatever their trauma is that they're going through.
So it's voluntary. They get to come in, or do their parents make them come?
No, it has to be voluntary. The youth has to agree to come to the program and participate in the program.
And they usually stay for the whole time?
Yes, they do.
Wow. So what is your role as a volunteer?
As a volunteer, I work a shift on Friday. I come in at 8:30, and I am with the staff as we get the kids up. They take their showers, they do their chores. There's an assigned chore schedule that rotates, so they're always doing something different. And that's part of what we're doing, is teaching them responsibility, teaching them how to do things they may not know how to do. We get kids occasionally who don't know how to make their bed. They've never been taught these basic skills. And that's all part of the program, is to teach community living, to teach them how to get along in life, how to take care of themselves, how to cook, how to wash dishes. So it's all part of learning to be an adult.
The kids are here for a 21-day stay. So they're here for 21 days. They get counseling Monday through Friday. There's recreational groups every day. They're out on a walk now. They go to the zoo. And yeah, they have family counseling sessions. The whole goal of the program is to reunite the family. So.
Now, do they go to school while they're there?
Some of the youth do, some don't. We don't have the transportation to take kids to school. Some school districts do provide taxis, and those school districts may make those accommodations. Some parents make the accommodations to take their children to school, but most do not. Those who don't, we have contact with their school counselors, and their homework is faxed to them every day. And we have study time at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We call it study quiet time. There's no activities going on at that time. And they sit at the table and do homework. We also have a tutoring program where some other students come in and help tutor some of our kids who are at the program.
Wow, that's great. And then you also have, and I know this is close to your heart, you also have some art that you do over there, right?
When I started volunteering, I had just retired from my job. I was a police officer in Oak Park for 25 years. And during most of that time, I was a detective. And that's how I became aware of Common Ground and Sanctuary, was because I used to bring kids over to Sanctuary occasionally.
So let's stop right there for a second. As a detective, and you're bringing people to Common Ground, what was the choice, Common Ground or?
Children's Village.
Okay, so this was more of a safe
Back in that day, it was mostly a runaway shelter, and since then the philosophy has changed some and included other kids.
Okay.
But that was a program at that time where it was a respite place where we could take kids who just couldn't go home for whatever reason.
Okay. So that's how you got involved, and then did you retire?
Yes.
You look a little young to be retired.
Well, I worked for 25 years, and then I took retirement.
Good for you. And then you started doing your volunteer
immediately.
work.
I knew I'd worked since I was 14. I knew I couldn't just sit home all day. And I immediately started looking for something that would fulfill some needs for me, and this does. I love going in there every Friday.
And so, because I have been there and I've seen some of the artwork you've done, so touch on that for us.
Well, when I started, because I'd worked and I was raising a family, I didn't have time for the art interest that I had explored when I was in high school. And when I retired, I started taking some art classes. And then I started realizing how soothing that was for me. And I thought, well, how can I incorporate this into when I spend time at Common Ground? And I started doing arts and crafts for our morning group, because we had 3 different groups during the day, group therapies. And we started doing arts and crafts for Friday morning group. And we do weaving with bracelets and beading, and then on the alternative Fridays, I bring in wood objects, like I get wood frame mirrors from IKEA, and we paint those, and then the kids can make whatever designs they want on the mirrors. And then as I started spending more time there and looking around and realizing we don't have a maintenance man, there's no funds for that. And occasionally things get a little shabby with that many people in and out all the time. And I started painting walls just to spruce the place up. And then I started talking with Steve Overstreet about how could we make it more cheerful. And that's when I started doing some murals.
And murals you did. They're beautiful. It's really brought the place to life. It really, art does that. You know, it changes things. So let's stay on this art subject and talk about art therapy, that the Common Ground offers that to who? Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, we have a program, that's called a Crisis Residential Home. It's for mentally ill adults who, it's kind of one step away from being in a hospital. It's a voluntary program, and they come to this home, and one of the programs in the home is an art therapy program, which is really effective, because what we found is the arts, expressing yourself and what happened to you in your life is really important information to get on the road to recovery, hope, and healing. And some people have trouble verbalizing the way they're feeling, but they can express it through art.
Right.
And even though we have that program now in the Crisis Residential Home, our goal is to have art therapists and art in all our programs, and not just painting arts, but we want to have writing and movement, because all 3 different people respond different ways.
Right.
It's very effective to get people to express themselves.
Great. So with this art therapy program, how long are the people in this crisis residential unit?
They can be in up to, the average is around 10 days.
Okay.
And they're in there to stabilize, and then they go back out in the community after that.
And do they do art therapy every day?
They do it every day, except maybe one day off. I don't know, but it's every day. I think.
A free day to go out and dance.
Yeah, they go out and dance, right.
So this is a lot of programs that how many programs does Common Ground have?
Well,
They're countless.
they're countless, yeah. You know, our programs come in 3 areas, which I think is important, where we impact lives. So the first area is responding to crisis 24 hours a day. So Kay working on the crisis line is one example where we have a lot of volunteers and staff. Another would be our OASIS program, which is the Oakland Assessment and Crisis Intervention Center. And there we have psychiatrists, nurses, social workers, and peers, which are people that have mental illness but are in recovery. And working with people 24 hours a day that come in. We serve over 5,000 people in that program. So those are 2 examples. Then there's programs where you keep people safe. So the program like the Sanctuary, which is our youth shelter, is a place while they're being kept safe. And the third area of programming, excuse me, is the creating a community of support when people don't have a community. So if somebody's had suicide or a homicide in their family, in their life, we have a survivors group for each one of those areas, and that's a support group when you don't have one in your own community.
So these are going on
Ongoing
continually.
groups. Yes.
Okay. So there is also a group that I know of, the Victim Assistance Program.
Right.
So tell us about
Crime
that one.
victim assistance. That's kind of straddles all 3 areas. So you
Okay.
could you could come in as a victim of domestic violence. So you're coming in as a crisis for counseling, and we can get people to safety, either a shelter, we don't have one, but other agencies have one, could be for safety. And if they're going to court for either a sexual assault or domestic violence, we have a victim advocate that sits with them through that whole court process. One example was person whose family, whose daughter was murdered. It was kind of got a lot of publicity with the powerhouse gym heir murdered this couple's daughter, who was his girlfriend at the time. And we were with the mother and father every day during the trial, sitting with them as they had to go through that process, and helping them to develop their victim statement so they can, which is very important in healing, so that when if your family member is a victim, not to get lost, but to bring out who they were as an individual. And that program is a very important program.
Wow, lots of programming. But the real gateway, as Kay said, is the 24-hour crisis line. So that's anyone, any person that has a problem, any kind of problem, right?
Any kind of a problem.
So how do you want to, how can we elaborate on that a little more?
Well, I just think that what's interesting to me is how well it opens these other doors, because people who come to Common Ground many times just don't even remember what strengths they have. They don't remember who's been helpful to them. They really sometimes don't even know what they want. They just know they hurt. They know that things are really bad. And my job, or whoever they talk to's job, is to help them, one, remember some of their strengths, and secondly, help them move along. You know, it's interesting when Tony was talking about the victims of homicide, for instance. You know, I've had people whose family members have been murdered, and they'll call, and they're in such shock that they have no idea of where to go or what to do. And when you can say, we have a support group, and maybe you're not ready now, but you might be ready sometime soon. When people call, we've had several veterans who come in, and even though the VA has some excellent programs, sometimes they need another way to get to help, and they come to us, and then we can eventually maybe connect them back up to the veterans, or maybe we're going to get them into some of our programs that work. So we're there in a whole variety of situations, and but it's more than listening. I mean, people sometimes just say to me, well, how can you listen to that junk all day, you know? Don't you go home so depressed that you don't know what to do? Well, no, I don't go home depressed, because I've been privileged to walk with somebody on a journey of courage. It takes a lot of courage to pick up that phone and say, you know, things aren't going well. I need some help. And then to allow me to learn a lot about their lives, and then to send them hopefully on their way in a better place, where they've moved from their crisis to a situation that's much more hopeful, much more useful, viable. It's a wonderful time. And I think even the caller, when it goes well, gets off the phone more energized, more focused, ready to start on what they have to do next.
Wow.
Yeah, and I want to add the courage part, because it does take a lot of courage to call. And we, excuse me, we started, we added a new component, which is you can now instant message into Common Ground. We started that in May. And mostly young people are using that. But you know, you're even afraid sometimes to talk, but you really feel anonymous when you can type out your message.
Right.
And you know, hopefully we try to get them to call after that, but if not, we can do the whole crisis via instant messaging.
So that could be texting or computer?
Well, no, just computer.
Okay.
But unless you have a smartphone, you can instant message from there. But beginning July 2nd, we start texting.
And where do those messages go? To the crisis center?
Right.
Yeah.
Right on the screen.
So that's kind of taking away some of the barriers of needing to ask for help, but being maybe embarrassed, or the stigma.
Exactly.
So tell us about the stigma a little bit. That's what we're moving past, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
we hope so.
Right, we're trying to get by there. I mean, there's barriers to asking for help. They could be cultural. It could be by ethnic group. You know, different groups have maybe in their culture bringing problems on the inside to the outside is taboo, and so you have to break through that. But I think there's a stigma about being mentally ill, that if you have asthma, it's okay, but if it's about your brain, it's not okay. And people look at people different when the problem is in the brain. Depression, anxiety. I mean, thousands of people have these illnesses, and they're totally normal within the illness spectrum. But we, as a society, I think we respond differently. So we really have to knock that out. I think that prevents a lot of people from asking for help because they're embarrassed about their illness.
Right.
We have people who, won't want to take their medication every day because it's about depression. Yet, if you had a breathing problem, I go back to asthma, you
Right.
take medication every day and you don't think anything of it. It should be no different.
Right. So how many people call this crisis line a year?
Over 50,000.
Wow.
It's
That's
busy.
a lot of people asking for help.
Yes.
But there's a lot more that aren't asking for
Right.
help, so that's the
Right.
whole
Right.
idea, is getting it out there. Now, is addiction considered a mental, how does that tie in? Can someone with some sort of addiction call and get some referrals or some help?
Oh, of course. Yes, and many times substance abuse goes hand in hand with mental illness because people who don't wish to, because of the stigma, again, don't wish to get medicine, self-medicate using drugs or alcohol or both, and sometimes then by the time they've called, they've really gotten themselves into a big pickle, and it's hard. I mean, those drugs are so easy to get to, and it temporarily takes care of things, but in the long run, it would be better to come to some place like Common Ground and get more stable, get a
Right.
better support system.
Right. So Mary, when you were a police officer and you were dealing with someone, was it your choice to bring them? Was it a call that you got to make, or how did you use Common Ground in the way to get people? Was it a protective way? Tell us about that.
Generally, it would have been a protective way where there was such an uproar at the house that the police were called, or the child had been running away so consistently that they were not safe out on the street.
Okay.
And the parent called. And so we couldn't force them, but we would give them the choice. If the parent's going to threaten the child, we're going to file incorrigibility on you and you'll go to Children's Village, which also has wonderful resources. Or a voluntary program would be to come to the sanctuary.
Okay.
So that's how I initially would get involved.
And don't you find that a lot of those kids have secrets
Oh,
themselves?
absolutely.
And again, they don't know where to
Who to
tell,
talk to, they don't
who's
feel safe.
Yes.
Which I love the word sanctuary because I think of the sanctuary, the house, is a physical sanctuary where the children are safe, but it's also an emotional sanctuary where they can bring their fears, they can bring their anger, they can bring their awkwardness of not knowing what to do or who to talk to,
Right.
and everything is safe in that house. We have group therapy 3 times a day with all of the youth that are there and staff. They have an individual counselor they're assigned to who they meet with for an hour a day. Family sessions are held at least once a week with the parent, guardian, whoever it is the child's living with is also involved in counseling. And their counselor is also involved in aftercare if they choose to take advantage of that program. So they have someone that they have some rapport with that they can continue to see after they leave our 3-week program. And a lot of them do take advantage of that. And we also have kids who come back again if things are still unsettled and they still need a little more support.
That is wonderful. Now, the sanctuary is a singular building, but why don't you tell us about how Common Ground and the sanctuary came together?
Oh, well, back in 1998, we started talking about merging. We both had some weaknesses as agencies and strengths, mostly in administrative support for the programs, and felt like there was no reason to compete, that our missions were very compatible, and it would be much more efficient to run as one organization. It would save the donors. It would make the donors' dollars more efficient, contract dollars more efficient. And we began a dialogue between the 2 agencies and boards of directors. And the decision was really quickly made that, yeah, we should come together.
Wow.
And we're real proud of that
I should say.
merger because it's been very successful. Both many staff that were leadership in the sanctuary in '98. I was the CEO of Common Ground at that time, and I held the position of the merger, but the people that were, the person that was the director of the sanctuary still works at Common Ground, and so does the director of the shelter. We were able to maintain all the staff, and I think everybody feels better that we're a stronger agency.
So, Kay, when you were doing the phone line, would you refer people to the sanctuary?
Of course, yes. And you know, I want to say one of the nicest things about Common Ground as a whole is that the people who are involved in it, I don't think Mary or Tony or I are unusual. That there's so many people who've been there for years because we love what we do. It's easy to go there because they're doing such a great job, and
we love the people we do it with
yes,
too.
That's right. So it's
I've made friendships because we have a like mind. We enjoy what we're doing, and we make good friends with the people that we work with at the agency.
That's great. And you know, Tony, that credit to you, because as the bus driver, it's important to drive the bus well. And when people are saying how comfortable they are, how happy they are to come to work, that just makes the work you do for the community that much better. And that's what this whole show is about, is to get the word out that Common Ground is there for anyone who needs it. So we have the crisis line. That's one way to get a hold of Common Ground. We have now the online, which is Common Ground. Is it the website, or is it?
Yeah, you go to the website.
Which is commongroundhelps.org.
Right. And there's a link to the
chat line.
Chat line.
So there's always room for more volunteers, right?
Oh,
and
of course,
of course,
always.
as a nonprofit, there's always donations are always welcome, because that's
right.
what keeps it going. And so we'll get some information about the next training if someone wants to get involved. But as you hear from these two lovely volunteers, it's really heartwarming and meaningful to go
That's
to
right.
go help
Absolutely.
at Common Ground. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope that this show has opened your eyes a little bit to the many things that Common Ground offers. I think there's more than 20 programs, and there's a lot of wonderful things happening at Common Ground. So this is the first of a series of shows that we'll do that introduce you to the many wonderful things that they do for everyone, not just people with a little problem, everyone and anyone. So call the 800 number or visit commongroundhelps.org. Thanks for joining us.